Hey friends, welcome back to Huge Head Studio. My name is Robbie, and today we are finally sculpting the last turtle for our series of the middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles. So if you haven't seen them yet, we kicked off the series with Leonardo, the responsible one. Then we followed him up with Donny, the smart one. And then after that, we made Raph, the tough one. But today, we get to make my favorite of the four, and the whole reason that I wanted to do this series in the first place. So we're finishing strong with Mikey, the fun one. And that's just the best way I know how to describe Mikey the way that I see him. Just pure fun and all party all the time. I see him aging like the cool uncle that never had any kids of his own but knows exactly how to find the joy in every situation. The one who never stopped being a teenager and has always marched to the beat of his own drum, and you can see it in the way that he acts and especially in the way that he dresses. But I honestly think that deep down Mikey is much more than that. I think he is 100% the emotional backbone of the group disguised as comic relief. And as the brothers age, I imagine he becomes the one who holds everybody together, cracking jokes at family dinners and gently distracting from the fact that their knees sound like microwave popcorn and they don't move quite like they used to. Mikey comes off as immature, but I don't see it that way. I think he's intentionally joyful and emotionally intelligent. Like he made a decision at some point that the world is already harsh and heavy and I don't have to be. Well, not harsh at least, because at this point his metabolism has officially clocked out and his lifelong pizza addiction has left him a little more doughy than his brothers. While the others develop skills through their dedication to their training, I think Mikey was always the most naturally gifted fighter as a teen. Not to say that he didn't put the work in, he was definitely a team player, but as he gets older I imagine the training matters less and less. There are probably mornings where he looks at his schedule and has to make a choice. Do I stick with my workout plan or try this underwater basket weaving class that I found a flyer for? All that to say, I think Mikey, like a retired NFL running back, has learned to enjoy life more outside the gym, which leads to a little extra around the middle. So to illustrate that, instead of building up some older but healthy pecs like I did for the others, Mikey is more in the moob category. There is probably still some muscle in there, but it's got a nice protective covering over it. Which is fine, as long as Mikey is happy, that's all that matters. But as I sculpted his arm, I tried to blend everything together a bit more, definitely not leaving him as chiseled as the other turtles. I got his upper arms built, but I don't want to start on his forearms just yet because I want to get the hands in place first, so I decided to change gears and focus on them. My plan is to have his right hand holding one handle of a nunchuck with the other tucked into his armpit, a classic Mikey pose. So I cut a little dowel to size and then wrapped the fingers around it, shooting for kind of a relaxed hold. And the other hand, of course, it had to be holding a slice of pizza. No way am I sculpting Mikey without including pizza somewhere. So I made a little slice and then coated it with a layer of liquid Sculpey, hoping to give it the texture of melted cheese, and then added a few circles for pepperonis and then placed it in the hand and threw it in the oven to bake. Once both hands were baked and hard, I fit the right hand with the nunchuck onto the end of the armature wire skeleton and then placed the other end of the nunchuck into the armpit and then got started on the weapon's chain. To make the chain, I wrapped some wire around a dowel in a spring shape and then cut out each circle to use as a link. After that, I linked them all together and then pressed them closed. I wrapped strips of clay around the ends of the dowels trying to make the attachment points for the chain, but actually and unintentionally created two tiny potato masher grenades. I squirted a bit of bacon bond onto the attachment points and then very delicately just mashed the chain into the clay until it felt like it wasn't going anywhere. And just like that, we got a nice set of nunchucks, which I'm pretty sure Mikey uses more as a fidget toy these days than an actual weapon. I added the pizza hand to the other side and then got to work attaching the turtle belly, taking my time to smooth it out and make sure Mikey's man boobies showed through just enough. With the hands in place, I can finally add the forearms, which I didn't want to add earlier because I'm not planning on adding many accessories to the left arm, and I wouldn't have had a good way to hide any imperfections if things didn't line up. So I put the hand in place first, which let me blend everything together and prevent the hand-to-wrist connection from looking too sectional. Like I said, I'm not trying to make them muscular and ropey like the other turtles, just adding a bit of doughy girth so they fit the rest of the arm. I then added a few accessories and decided to move on to the head. I started the head using the same steps as all the others, wrapped a layer of clay over an aluminum foil ball base and then added some balls of clay to it to build the beak, and then compared it to one of the previous builds to make sure the proportions matched close enough so that they'd all look cohesive on a shelf. Once satisfied with the proportions, I blended it all together and then made the eye sockets a little smaller before setting the eyes in place, which look absolutely terrifying from this point forward until I fix them with paint. Next, I lay out the mouth, which I want to be open in a big, goofy, toothy grin, so I carve out the excess clay and then lay in some square chiclets in the style of the turtles from the live-action 90s movie. which definitely leads to me questioning every decision I've made thus far. The sculpt that's intended to be of a fun, happy middle-aged turtle is currently looking like a new demented animatronic at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But no reason to worry, this is a typical stage in every sculpt where it looks like hot garbage, and in this case the mask should definitely fix it. Ugh, or make it look even creepier. Okay, so yeah, middle-aged Mikey is looking like the creepier, not-so-cool uncle at the moment, but we'll fix it with paint. Once the head is done, I add a little ball to the armature wire skeleton to make a neck and then press the head down on it to create a seat before removing it to blend the neck into the body. I then blend it onto the head as well and then smooth it all out to make sure there are no seams. And that pretty much wraps up the head and the body, so now we're ready to accessorize, starting with his harness. For this series, I've tried to make each harness fit the character. For Mikey, I'm thinking a modern nylon harness, maybe from the early 2000s, like something he found in a Hot Topic or a CCS skate catalog. You know, the stuff us older millennials still think is cool. I then added a knot and tails to his mask and then roughed up the edges before adding a super important Game Boy strap to his harness. And with that, let's see if we can fix this face with paint. We start the paint just like I did with the other sculpts, with a fast and loose green base coat. I go into this in more detail in the previous video, so if you haven't seen them, go ahead and click the link to Leo's video that should be popping up on the screen. You can also find links to all 3 videos in the description below. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, well, maybe get your grandma to subscribe too then. Old people like art and stuff, right? Anyway, I use a hard bristle brush to flick some character onto the skin and then repeat the process with lighter color as well. Then I apply a base coat of brown onto the shell and turtle belly with the same fast and loose technique. Once the base coat dries, I dab on a bit of yellow ochre onto the belly to give it some texture before moving on to the fun part, Mikey's terrible tattoos. I want these tattoos to look like they belong on someone who lives for the here and now, someone who gave very little thought to whether they were a good idea and then treated aftercare like it was a myth, so the tattoos look old and blown out and faded. To try and achieve that look, I decided to use alcohol markers instead of paint, because the markers are a bit more transparent and they should help create that nice, faded, slightly ugly tattoo vibe. You know, the vibe you get when you use pizza grease on your finger as moisturizer for the healing process. Once the tattoos were good and bad, I painted his mask and sweatpants in a faded version of his favorite orange and then added some black to his mouth and eyes to create some shadows. Then applied some off-white to the teeth with a light hand so that the brush would cover the teeth without touching the black in the recessed lines. Next, I added the same off-white to the eyes, followed by a bit of true white to help the shading of the eye so it didn't look so flat. I decided to add a gold tooth while his eyes were drying because, I don't know, why not, and then gave his eyes a nice blue iris before moving on to the pizza slice. I've never sculpted food before, so I'm sure all the miniature food creators out there are thinking this looks like garbage, but this is a sculpt of an overweight middle-aged mutant ninja turtle with bad tattoos, so I don't think super realism was ever really the goal here. I added a little bracelet for each brother because Mikey is sentimental like that, and then I applied a flat charcoal gray to the harness to give it that used to be black faded look. After that, I added the classic Van-style checker pattern because, like I said before, he absolutely bought this thing when Tony Hawk was in his prime and hasn't quite realized how much time has passed since then. So much time, in fact, that the games he grew up playing are now being remastered. Speaking of games, we had to include a classic Game Boy so that Mikey can fire up Fall of the Foot Clan whenever he wants. Finally, all that's left to do is add a bit of grunge and stank to his belt and mask because Mikey has been wiping his pizza fingers on this stuff for decades. And with that, Mikey is all done and ready to be assembled and join his brothers on the shelf. Well, I sure do hope you enjoyed this little series. I know I did. Even though the turtles are done, I wouldn't say the series is over. I'd be more than happy to tackle a geriatric Shredder, or maybe a slightly winded Bebop and Rocksteady at some point, because if the turtles are aging, you know their enemies didn't exactly stay young either. If you enjoyed the series, be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on what kind of dumb idea I come up with next. I'm always open to suggestions as well, and I've already added a few requests to my project list, so let me know what you want to see in the comments. But that about does it for now, so I appreciate you hanging out with me, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.